Mother Blakely.
Queen Mother Blakely. Oh, Bashir, can you see what I did wrong?
Queen Mother Blakely, are you talking to us or someone else?
No, I said Queen Mother Blakely.
Tell us where you are and whether or not you're actually a member of WILF.
I'm the community mayor of Harlem and been at the United Nations as NGO New Future Foundation as a humanitarian myself for about 52 years. And I'm a guest on your session today.
Well, thank you, Queen Mother Blakely. Nellie Hester Bailey is a member in New York, and we want to start a branch in New York, and we're counting on you to join us as a member of the New York branch, since you're in the Harlem area, I believe. So now
yes, I'm in Harlem. Yes, I am in Harlem.
Great, thank you, Queen Mother.
Thank you.
So George Friday, please introduce yourself and tell us the ground rules. I may have missed somebody, or is Philip Cole on twice? Ashley is on twice, and Philip Cole is on twice. George, could you please check and make sure I haven't missed anyone who should be introduced?
We did miss Dee Murphy, who it says Ashley Carrington, but I see Dee Murphy's face. But let me introduce myself and we'll go to Dee. I'll tell you guys about the timekeeping piece. I'm George Friday. I'm in the Triad branch in Gastonia, North Carolina. And I'll be helping to keep time. So when we're making comments or having discussion, when you have 1 minute left, I'll put up the finger, the dreaded finger, to say you have 1 minute left. And when that 1 minute is over, I will mute you. And Teresa will go to the next person. So Dee, do you want to introduce yourself?
And if Dee could change the name on her thing, because yeah. How did you get to be Ashley Carrington, Dee?
Oh, I asked if she would share the link to the meeting because for some reason I didn't receive it. And I can't change the name. I'm trying really hard to do this here, but I'm Dee Murphy. I live in central Minnesota and I am a member of WILF at present.
So Dee, if you go up to the little square that you're on, let me turn off my camera.
I'm using my phone, so.
Oh yeah, I'm no good with phones. I'm so sorry about that.
Well, you were sent the link, Dee. So maybe you want to get off and get back on.
Okay.
Yeah, that would
I wasn't sent the link, but I'll manually type it in. Okay, thank you.
Well, great. Now we're ready for our eminent guests. Everybody, please mute yourselves because we have a very special guest at our meeting, Beatrice Schultes. She is the international regional representative of WILF, and she will further introduce herself. We've allowed her 10 minutes, but we understand there may be some questions for her. We're gonna skip the slideshow. There she is, the beautiful Beatrice Schultes. So please tell everyone who you are.
Yes, hello, my name is Beatrice Schultes. I'm living here in Costa Rica on the Caribbean coast. I'm sort of a mixed blood, indigenous, and I have Black ancestors. I am a member of the International IB Board and also a member of the Costa Rican Section Board. And as a regional representative for North, Meso, and South America, we really started this term new because the change was made during the last Congress. I do share the concerns that WILF needs to become more colored. And since our region, at least Meso and South America, has not been very present, we don't have a lot of sections here ready already, but I'm working on a section in Brazil, which will start in Bahia, where by black ladies. And here in Costa Rica, we have a subsection on the Caribbean coast where I share the work with an Afro-descendant woman also. As I was looking through a little bit the history of WILF, I found out that in 1919, there was a lady called Mary George Teller who worked very closely with Jane Addams. And she was the author in 1919 of a resolution called Race Equality. So she was saying then, we recommend that members of this Congress should do everything in their power to abrogate laws and change customs which lead to discrimination against human beings on account of race and color. I found that quite interesting. I would suggest even to read the whole thing of 1919. They have several issues they worked on which are similar to what we are working in today. Myself, I came into contact with WILF in 1977, actually September 1977, when indigenous peoples entered for the first time UN premises in Geneva, Switzerland. WILF did then quite a bit of work in order that this became a reality. In those days, it was Edith Ballantyne who was the Secretary General. And she is today 99 years old and is still encouraging everyone to continue with their struggle. I finally joined the early 80s because of her, mainly because her work, I thought it was very, very good. As a regional representative, we have to establish a good and solid working relationship. We have to reach out as much as possible to the leadership of each section. That's what we are doing. And maybe what I just noted here in one slide, that on other issues, international issues, where WILF is actually not yet active, within the UN, there is a UN working group of experts on people of Afro descent, maybe you know that already, which was established in 2002. The group is composed by 5 independent experts. Dominic Day, a representative of USA, is the current chair of this group. You also should have a look, if you can, to the United Nations page of the International Decade for People of African Descent. I have been following such related sessions, and it was quite lame, really not really doing very, very well. Well, we have to understand that it is governments who take decisions, so it is not so easy always. The intention was to create a permanent forum of people of African descent within the UN, similar to the one of indigenous people. I will leave it like that. Many thanks for your attention. So I hope I didn't pass the time.
Thank you, our regional rep. You did not pass the time. So we'd like to open up a stack for a few questions for you, if there are any, before we move on to the next item.
Can I just say that I think I know very well Queen Mother Blakely.
Oh, yeah, from the UN?
Yes. It's a long time I don't see her, yes.
Well, that is great. It's a homecoming. So George, do you see any people in the stack?
No.
Well, since there are no questions for our representative, I think she will get an earful in terms of what we're working on. and how we got started with the Black Liberation Caucus.
Yeah.
So in the way of an introduction, in December of 2020, George Friday and I organized an AFRICOM webinar as part of the Disarm in Wars Committee of WILF. It was attended by over 330 people, and there were 8 African countries represented in terms of WILF sections, from Nigeria, the Cameroon, DRC, Kenya. There were quite a few African countries represented. And a woman who I invited to join a year ago, I think today, she's with the Black Alliance for Peace. Her name is Margaret Kimberly, and she represented BAP, Black Alliance for Peace, which is working very hard on getting AFRICOM out of Africa. Well, after that very important webinar, one of the chairs of the Disarm in Wars Committee called me a racist for talking about dismantling white supremacy inside of WILF US. And that was the impetus for the Southern Anti-Racism Network, working to build branches in the South led by women of color. And to date, we have 3 branches in the South, where there was only one, an all-white branch in the Triangle of North Carolina. So we integrated the all-white branch, and then we started the Triad branch, which covers the Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point area. And then we started the Metro Atlanta branch. The first branch to come online, Sister Beatrice, was the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. And because there is a book written, No Peace Without Freedom, which talks about how WILF in the US treated Fannie Lou Hamer because she was a sharecropper and didn't have a college degree. So we didn't get to play the Fannie Lou Hamer music, but we'll play it on the way out. It's our theme song for the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, which was started in March of this year, 2021. The Triad branch and the Metro Atlanta branch, both branches were started in May of this year. And we also launched the Black Liberation Caucus. So the Southern Anti-Racism Network, an organization I started in 1998, is actually the sponsor for the new branches and the Black Liberation Caucus. So we can receive nonprofit donations because of that. So the bank account for the Fannie Lou Hamer branch in Columbus is sponsored by the Southern Anti-Racism Network. And we were given a $1,500 mini grant from US WILF for a conference, which we'll talk about later. But George, would you please put up the BOPA so we can see if there are any additions or conversation about the BOPA? So Sister Beatrice, this is our basis of political agreement, which we call the BOPA, which was put in place 5/22/2021. So George, if you could read the BOPA decisions. Let me give my voice a rest.
We make decisions by consensus, addressing questions, concerns, or objections. The steering committee meets every month with 2 representatives of African descent from each branch that have 2 representatives. Our areas of work are reparations, free all political prisoners, criminal justice reform, end mass incarceration, ending voter suppression, Free Palestine Solidarity, Anti-Racist Transformation of WILF US, Solidarity with Other Oppressed Peoples of Color, Universal Health Care for All, Medicare for All, and Immigration Justice.
Can I have a copy of that later on?
Absolutely, I'll email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additions or deletions? I'm trusting Teresa will jump in when she's ready, but I know that's the next.
I'm sorry, I was muted and I was just talking away. So that is the question before you, everyone. At each meeting, we always ask if there are any additions or changes or any conversation about any of the areas of work, because the rest of the meeting will be rather focused on the anti-racist transformation of WILF US, given the activities of the past week, including our meetings with the International Secretariat, of which several of us were in those meetings. And I did make a point that we are in a struggle in WILF US to dismantle white supremacy based on our BOPA for the anti-racist transformation of WILF US. So I'd like to ask everyone, are you still committed to what we agreed to, the anti-racist transformation of WILF US? And this is not a chance to be silent. So if you wanna unmute yourself and say yes. I see Ashley Carrington is saying yes in the chat. So we need to hear from everyone in the meeting before we go forward. So everybody either write yes in the chat or unmute yourselves or show your camera and raise your hand. Deidre is saying yes. So Philip Cole, this was your item that you put into the BOPA. So are you still committed to it?
Well, you know, I put in there, yes, to work on the anti-racist transformation of WILF, and I would like to get clarification from you about the makeup of the Black Liberation Caucus. And that would be, there's been several questions about who can be a member. There's been questions of can people of European descent make presentations at the Black Liberation Caucus? Can they become honorary members or auxiliary members or act in solidarity?
That is a question for us to discuss probably at the next meeting, but I would say, and I have been consistent, people of European descent are not members and should not attend the caucus. The same way as you made the example of the Black Caucus, the Black Congressional Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, there are no white members in that. There are no white members in the Latinx caucus. So there can really be no white members in this caucus. We agreed to that by saying solidarity with other oppressed peoples of color. That excludes people of European descent. I know we all have friends that we consider white allies, Philip, but white people at this point are not members and cannot be members of this caucus. That was the idea when I started it and called it the Black Liberation Caucus. So we've heard from Ashley, we've heard from Dee, we've heard from Dr. Kennedy. George, are you still down with the cause?
I had a follow-up question when you are ready to call on me again.
Yep, I put up my thumb, but I guess y'all didn't see my thumbs up. But yes.
No, Philip. We'll call on you later because I know you're pushing for Barbara Nielsen, quite frankly. And
yeah, well, that's not true.
Well, just mute yourself, Philip. Because, you know, when men come into these women's spaces, I know that some men are not actually feminists, and I don't think Philip is. But Philip, since you want to keep lifting yourself up, we will call on you. I don't think you noticed when you asked your long question in the international meeting how all of the women ignored you. You didn't notice that. And I think you didn't quite understand why. But I'll be happy to have that conversation with you later, Philip. But for now, since there are no changes, and can we, George, can you check to see if you could take down the BOPA, George? Yes, Dr. Jean, we can be open to his questions, but this is a Fannie Lou Hamer branch facilitation, and we have a certain time limit that we set up for this meeting. And I am really opposed to an extensive kind of mansplaining. And that's just me and my feminist nature. And I'm running this monthly meeting, and we want to make sure that we cover the full agenda. So the next item on the agenda is the continuum, which George Friday has shared with the National Board of Wilf. And it is what we have talked to them about in terms of where the National Board is. And it's where we need to go as the next item. And I will explain to you later about mansplaining, Philip. It is something that feminists know very well. So, George, could you please put up the continuum?
All right, so I'm sharing with y'all a tool that I created in the mid to late 90s, along with people who are doing anti-racism work together, and an organization called in Chicago, Crossroads Ministry. They don't exist anymore, but we're the people that put this together. And this gives you a description of stages of moving from being an exclusively white, intentionally segregated institution to being an institution that is transformed and, you know, in a place that ideally people who are anti-racist want to be. And I use this in work and use it as a measurement tool. So I am going to read some of the descriptions here out loud, in case you can't read it yourself, and also put it so you can read it. So, an exclusively segregationist institution intentionally and publicly excludes, segregates, or alienates socially oppressed groups: women, gays, people of color, third world citizens, transgender, queer people, and intentionally and publicly enforces the oppressive status quo throughout the institution. Now, of course, we couldn't say that is exclusively where WILF US is. Let's look at number 2, a passive club or an institution. The institution is tolerant of a limited number of people from socially oppressed groups with proper credentials and a proper perspective. So if you think the right way, if you went to the right colleges, or you have the right pedigree, you're okay. It may still secretly limit or exclude people from socially oppressed groups in contradiction to what they say publicly, because this institution that's a passive club publicly says they're not a passive club. They continue to intentionally maintain status quo power and privilege through formal policies, practices, teachings, and decision-making on all institutional levels. That sounds familiar. often declares we don't have a problem. Very familiar. Now, 3, the symbolic change makes official policy pronouncements regarding multicultural diversity. We're working on racial justice. Sees itself as non-oppressive institution with open doors to all people from socially oppressed groups. Carries out intentional inclusive efforts. We're going to have a reading group. Recruits someone gay or people of color or people from an immigrant community on committees or office staff. So you can work for us, but you can't be leader. Expanding views of diversity includes all socially oppressed groups, but not those who make waves. Don't get too loud. You better act right. There's little or no contextual change in culture, in policies, or decision-making. And this particular institution is still relatively unaware of the continuing patterns of privilege, paternalism, and control. Now, most groups will strive to be a 4 or a 5. Never seen a 6 in my life, even though I've worked for groups that work on this very, very intentionally. And in my expert opinion, and I will say expert opinion here, wealth is not even a 3. They're at best somewhere like a 2.3 or a 2.4. They're not even halfway to being a 3, although they do make these official pronouncements. So they have a couple of characteristics of a 3, but for sure, WILF US currently is not tolerant of those who make waves. There's little contextual change in culture, policies, or decision-making. In fact, one could say, as a result of the Black Liberation Caucus, or some of what we've done, and certainly some of what some of us as individuals have done, there's been a tightening, a narrowing of policies to control decision-making and protect the power. So this is something I can share with y'all in terms of where do we want to go? How do we get institutions to be more 4s or 4.5? That would be amazing and a miracle. But the characteristics under 4, this is making an identity change. It's not transformation, but it is accountability and commitment happens as 4s. Beginning to develop that accountability and increasing commitment to dismantle oppression and eliminate inherent white male heterosexist advantage. The institution, though, still has the structures that maintain the culture and maintain white supremacy, and that does happen when you're at a 4. Any questions? I feel like this is enough overview of this document. Is there anything that y'all have questions about that I can share? Anything I've left out, Teresa, that you know?
Well, I think it's important to share the document with everyone in the Black Liberation Caucus. And I know that we are about to engage in what appears to be a factional struggle inside of the BLC, led by Dee, who is saying there are 4 women who disagree with me. And this is a time for the 4 women that Dee has called that disagree with me because of something that's going on in another organization between me and Dee. Dee is now bringing it into the Black Liberation Caucus. She can't see a way of separating that. And I'm for confronting these kinds of matters head on. So who are the 4 women in this meeting that Dee has put in the chat that disagree with me?
Well,
I would appreciate. Say what?
You know what you're dealing with, Beatrice. There's no disagreement. There's name calling, there's attacks, there's claims, there's discrediting our work. It's not a racial issue. It's weaponizing racism whenever it benefits her, and then lecturing about feminism and then turning and attacking one Black woman after another, name calling, destroying our work. It's not just another thing. It's going on here in WILF. It's going on in other organizations. So you should be aware when you get in bed and it's your turn, that's the pattern.
Well, Dee, if you could mute
And
yourself.
it's just me. Watch, wait and see.
George, if you could mute Dee, because we need to hear from other people besides Dee. So it's time now for the stack, so everyone can get on the stack. We had a great Umoja Unity Talks session yesterday where many white members of WILF were present and spoke about how much they appreciate the work that George and I are doing. So in spite of what Dee says, we have numerous white allies in the work that George and I have engaged. So the floor is open. George, can you see a stack?
No one's typed it in the chat. No hands are up.
Well, let's go back to Philip because Philip has something to say. So Philip, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Well, my question, my follow-up question would be, if you are basically trying to address discrimination against people of color, and I would think people, period, how could you, how are you justifying excluding European people from not necessarily being members of the Black Liberation Caucus, but of being able to make presentations, be able to attend meetings as a guest? So it seems a little hypocritical that you can accuse an organization of discrimination, but yet turn around and discriminate again, and you may have a answer for this action, but I would like to hear it.
This is something that we set up, Philip, as a democratic process. That's why we rotate around the branches. My guess for this meeting is Beatrice. When the San Francisco branch has its turn facilitating, you can have whatever guests you want to have. There's no bar against that. That's true of the Metro Atlanta branch, of the Triangle branch, and all of the branches, because we agreed that we would rotate through the list of branches. And so all branches get to facilitate. This just happens to be the Fannie Lou Hamer branch facilitation. Next month, it will either go to the Triangle or to the Metro Atlanta. They're on the list and they haven't done it yet. You and Gene Kennedy did the San Francisco Fresno. So there is no bar when your turn comes and you're in a branch. You have to be in a branch to be on the facilitation role. That was what we agreed to. If I'm wrong about that, we can hear from people. But I do see that Ashley is on the stack. So let us hear from Ashley.
You're saying that people of European descent can be guests and can make presentations to the Black Liberation Caucus. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's entirely up to you. If it's on the term of the branch that's facilitating, it's entirely up to the branch that's facilitating on that round. So you've had your turn. And so when it comes back around to your turn, or if Metro Atlanta wants to invite a white person to the meeting, it's entirely up to them. They would come as a guest, just as Beatrice is a guest of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. And so that is the way it would be fair to me. I cannot be saying who is excluded overall. It's my preference that we do not make a habit of inviting people of European descent to our meetings, because we did establish this as a people of color caucus. And if we decide that we want to negate that by having Europeans as members of the caucus, well, we are no longer a Black Liberation Caucus. So does that answer your questions, Philip?
It addresses the questions. doesn't answer it, but it addresses it.
Well, thank you. Please mute yourself, Philip, because I think I was quite clear. Ashley Carrington, you're on the stack.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to directly respond to Philip and kind of say, for my own comfort and for the safety of what I feel the spaces that is necessary to be created for Black people within this organization, I do think that any person who is on the board or voting member or someone who is active and has the ability to create change within the caucus should be of African descent. Having our European counterparts as observers or allies, or true advocates, I am not opposed to, but I definitely think it is very important within this organization for there to be a space for people of color to be able to talk and have a safe discourse, to be able to uplift the issues of the Black community, because as people of color, we are the only ones who are able to speak to the issues of our community. And so having a space that is exclusively geared towards addressing those issues and making sure that everyone's voice is heard, that is of African descent or of descent of a person of color, that is very important to me. And I would hope that we would definitely make sure that that's always at the forefront of what we do, because that was my understanding of what coming into the BLC was. And that if we are opening it up, that we are of the understanding that this is not a space for people of European descent to voice their opinions, because they should not be voicing their opinions on issues regarding people of color, just as we don't intrude into their spaces and try to make those changes. So that is all I wanted to add into the conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Ashley is one of the younger members that we've intentionally recruited. Very few of us are under 60 years old. When I look around the room, I think that Cece Anderson is in her 50s. I know that Dee, I think, is younger than 50. I'm not sure how old she is, but I know that Ashley, I think, is in her 30s. But many of us are over 60. And part of building wealth as an organization, what the Southern Anti-Racism Network has done is recruit younger women to wealth and women of color who are younger. And I consider them the rising stars of the new wealth as we work to transform it. And we want to eliminate any hostility. So Dr. Kennedy is asking that question about, can people be invited only when it's your facilitation turn? Well, you have to ask the facilitator, the facilitating branch, if you want to invite someone, Dr. Kennedy. So the next facilitators will be either Metro Atlanta or Triangle. And so at the end of the meeting, whoever they are, you'll have to get up with them and ask them if you want to invite white people on their turn. But I will live up to Ashley's understanding, and I will not be asking white people to come to the Black Liberation Caucus. There are many other opportunities for us to engage, which you'll hear about when we talk about the Fannie Lou Hamer Branch Human Rights Conference. George, help me out. What's next on the agenda? George, are you there?
I am. I'm about to share you the agenda.
Thank you. So we've been on the continuum that George created. And I must say that we've used that continuum to do a workshop with a company in Atlanta last September, and it was very well received. It's a workshop that George and I and another member of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch does, which is called Equity and Inclusion. And so we will continue doing those workshops with businesses and other nonprofits as the Southern Anti-Racism Network. So on the action proposals, this is kind of something that probably requires a multi-meeting discussion. I'm proposing that we have a summit which would allow for white members to be included in a conversation about the anti-racist transformation of will. George, you did share the Umoja Unity Talks recording with everyone.
I did.
Because we focused in the meeting yesterday on wealth and its anti-racist transformation. So the white allies in the meeting yesterday were embracing the work of the Black Liberation Caucus. Philip was there, I think, during that period. So he can say some more about the proposal. I'm proposing that we conduct an anti-racist summit in February. That will be an opportunity for all of the different groupings in Wealth US, the book group, whatever comes out of the national board under Philip's leadership, to have a summit in February, late February, where we can discuss what we're trying to do in collaboration with white allies. So the Southern Anti-Racism Network is multinational. We have many white board members and other members around the country. Samantha Turner will be joining the board of SARN in January. Kat Canella is the treasurer of the board. We have Dr. Jennifer Disney of Winthrop University, who is on the board. We have Russell Cody, who's retired and of European descent, on the board. So we are not prejudiced, Dee and others. We do work with white people because I've learned years ago that you can't undo racism without the participation of reliable allies. And I do point out reliable allies, because we will find that many white people will be unreliable. So I do want to open up the floor for the idea of an action proposal, that we have a anti-racism summit. And I say anti-racism summit because we're talking about institutions and not individuals. Wilf has set up institutional racism in the US by having all white branches, all white branches. You can point to branch after branch after branch. Dr. Jean Kennedy has told me she's the only Black woman in her branch. Philip has told me he's the only Black person in his San Francisco branch. I do know that Julie is the only Black person in the Boston branch. I do know that they have no Black people whatsoever in the Philadelphia branch. I have been a part of WILF since the 80s. And so I do know the struggle that WILF has had in dealing with all white branches. It's institutionalized. And so I do want to open up for comments about the proposal. It looks like Ashley was saying that she supports the idea of us doing such a thing in late February. And the reason why I say late February is because, George, correct me if I'm wrong, the next round of the mini grants is going to be in February. What's the date for the application of the mini grant in February?
February 16th.
So we found that within a week's time, we were approved for the mini grant. So if we have a budget that we can present before February 16th to WILF at the national level, and that's handled by Ellen Schwartz and someone else, So that's something that we would work on as the Black Liberation Caucus to come up with a mini grant proposal in case we would have to pay some speakers for the anti-racism summit in February. So I heard from Ashley saying that it sounded like a good idea. So what say you all?
Yes, I was just saying that I am the only woman of color in my branch, but I definitely agree that it is a good idea. There definitely needs to be some sort of cultural awareness training, a workshop, as you're mentioning, Teresa, to make sure that everyone in all the branches is aware and comfortable interacting with people of color, because that's one thing that I found in my branch is that they're just not comfortable with me, but that's not my job to make other people comfortable with my presence. So definitely something that like this is I believe needed, and will also help in bringing in people of my, millennial group and under into WILF to continue the work of WILF and creating that space for us to be heard and to continue everything that's being achieved as of now.
Oh, thank you so much, Ashley. You're such a joy. George, you, and then I do want to put Dr. Kennedy on the spot because I know that she's been doing some work inside of her branch, and I'd like for her to tell us a little bit about that. George, your comment.
Well, I appreciate what you said there, Ashley, but the expectation that we will get WILF US white members comfortable, I gotta say, I caution you to take that on because it's not gonna happen. In fact, they need to be uncomfortable and they need to be comfortable in their discomfort. That's part of the problem that I've experienced, and part of what comes with these, oh, we've gotta have these guidelines for communication and you can't be offending people. And that's all about maintaining their comfort. I know I'm sending y'all the continuum, but Ashley, I'm going to send you something. It's called Perfectionism or something about the ways that institutional racism shows up in groups. And one of them is the right to comfort. There are all these things that white people impose that's part of white supremacist culture that we just don't even know came from white supremacist culture. The need for an agenda, keeping things on time, all of this stuff, but I'll send it to you. A big one is the right to comfort. And white people will just lose their minds if they think they're not getting their right to comfort. The other thing I got on the stack to share is for us to think about that there is a difference between institutional white supremacy and racism. WILF has been around since 1905.
No, 1915, George. 1915.
I'm thinking of something else. Over 100 years. There's no way an institution that's over 100 years old isn't eat up with white supremacy. How could it not be? Have they ever done anything to get rid of it? No. So it's there. It's evolved. It's transformed. And what it looks like from the individuals are acts of racism. But the root is white supremacy. That's all. Pass.
And Dr. Jean Kennedy, I think she has some expertise in this area. A woman that I think who will help us is named Sian Moyer, and she's in Vermont, and she's made it clear that she will only work with WILF if we pay her. So we'll hear from Dr. Jean Kennedy and then from our special guest, Beatrice. Dr. Jean Kennedy.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm not sure I'm going to say anything that's going to be out of the ordinary, but I will say I want to at least speak from my experience, having been in WILF for almost 20 years, maybe a little under that. So I wrote some things when you were talking, so I would not ramble on and then get muted for whatever reasons. So I want to stay within the agenda. There is a difference between attacking personhood and attacking behavior of people. So let me say that again. There is a difference between attacking personhood and attacking behaviors of people. So I'm always very careful because I think all voices are valuable because it gives us an idea of where we're positioning ourselves. So in saying that, I personally respect my allies because they need me as much as I need them. On the last Sunday of each month, which is today, we have created a group that we've been doing now, not quite a year. Next couple of months, I believe, will be a year. And it's called Unpacking Racism and Discovering or Understanding Your Blind Spots. Unpacking Racism and Understanding Your Blind Spots. This is conducted with volunteers of the women's group, Women's International Group. Not everyone who's a member comes to it, but it is an open invitation. The group has its growth, and sometimes it's just a handful, just depending. And what we are doing is unpacking racism. And that conversation, they own that. We, who are we? All Black folks who have come in as guests. And I just recently was fortunate and blessed to have another Black man join. When I heard of Mr. Phillips being in there, I said, I got to go get me a guy in my group. And we were fortunate to have someone who's very well recognized and appreciated for his social justice and activism, and asked him if he would be there to help keep my hands up, hold up my hands, because I need to have the support of someone who looks like me too, not just my white sisters. And indeed, they are my sisters. And so, again, I personally respect my allies because they need me as much as I need them. I would want to have them be part of something where they can learn to listen and understand. I wrote an article just this month for our newsletter that says the importance of understanding why we need to listen. And so we being those in my white sisters, understanding there is an intention when we have our meetings on these Sunday nights for them to do more listening and less talking. But when it comes for their time, I want them to speak up and know that they're in a safe space. So I don't know if any of this makes sense. Maybe someone in the group might say, aha, I understand what you're saying. Others, I don't know. You may agree or disagree. But we're working on is not just unpacking the racism. They're unpacking the racism. But I want them to understand their blind spots. That's where it gets very meaty, in them actually recognizing their blind spots. They would never be able to recognize it if they weren't having a dialogue with someone that's different from them. I hope that makes sense. And I hope I answered the question that you wanted me to do, Sister Teresa.
Absolutely, because your expertise, Dr. Jean Kennedy, is what will be important to the summit, because you've been doing this for quite some time. And I say you've been doing it alone, and a lot of people don't know that you're doing it. So if there's a way for any of us to be a kind of fly on the wall at these sessions, I would love to see how it works, because I've been in many things like this before, and I do see our guest Beatrice has her hand up, and she is next on the stack. Thank you. Thank you. Beatrice, we would love to hear from you now. Please unmute yourself and speak, Beatrice.
Yes, thank you. I was very glad to hear all what you are proposing. And also even the discussion between you, I think it's very healthy. When I just heard George a moment ago talking about the discomfort of people and that they need to be uncomfortable, that is something I'm going through myself within the WILF IB right now, and even with the Secretariat. It's not, well, I have been doing that for years, and I usually say I'm vaccinated and I just continue and go ahead. But it is very true that sometimes they need to feel uncomfortable in order that eventually they understand something. And that's what I'm trying to do at my level also. And thank you for all what you are all saying, contributing. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit more, Sister Beatrice, because we aren't putting out the whole discussion from the 3 days with the International Secretariat. We did that at the Umoja Unity Talks yesterday. So I would urge you to watch the video that George sent you. The meeting went on for less than 2 hours, but it was all about how we can get engaged at the international level to find allies throughout Europe, Canada, and the other sections to support our efforts. Because you were there those 3 days and you heard Madeline Reese talk about how badly Melissa Torres was treated by Wilf US and how she gave up and walked away from the US section, but she's still a vice president on the international board. So these are things that we will be continuing our conversations with you about, Beatrice, because you are our regional rep, and we are getting ready for the big Congress in July, and the pace is rapidly going. And I believe today is the last day to have input on the JAM board. Can you explain about that if you know?
Input in the JAM board? I'm not quite sure, but I will check and answer you, because I was asking for the other board because they have about 3 different boards. So I have to ask and let you know.
George and I were paying close attention, and on Sunday morning, I think you were in that meeting a week ago. When Madeline Reese, there were only 15 of us, and I asked Shireen of the Lebanon section to tell about the
situation there. Yeah.
Yes. And so we had a good discussion. Philip Cole was in that session. And so the discussion did steer towards the US section and the problems we're having.
But what I saw in the website that you still can send contributions in to the membership email.
Well, we are not given the information clearly. So if you could talk to Jane, because the president of WILF National Board has said that she is not engaged in the process. When I asked her to put out on the branches list how we can follow the international progress of the Congress, she said she would not do that. So we need Jane to help us, since Jane is your deputy.
Janet, I think she did already. Janet is her name, Janet Slatter. I will talk to her later on and make sure that she sends everything out also.
Yes, because
I thought she did it already.
She is one person that I would be open to getting invited to the Black Liberation Caucus, but I don't have any say-so over that beyond today. Perhaps I could suggest it to the Metro Atlanta, which CC Anderson is one of the reps that I recruited to WILF, and she's in the call. And then Triangle, Ashley Carrington is in the call. So between the two of them, they will be deciding who is going to facilitate the December 19th meeting. And then the other branch will facilitate the January meeting. And then we'll see where we are. We have a woman of color in the Detroit branch who should have been with us today. She did register. So quite a few people who registered are not with us today, but we have a new branch representative that's come online, Rebecca Irby, who is an expert on the TPNW, and she will be in the rotation during next year. So George, help me out. Oh, what's
how
next?
Can I help?
What's next on the agenda after the action proposals? Because I put out the one proposal, and I will ask that we have further discussion about it on the December 19th agenda, whoever is facilitating, Metro Atlanta or Triangle. So what's next after the action proposals?
Fannie Lou Hamer Branch Human Rights Conference, December 11th.
Great, great. Because this meeting was planned as a 90-minute meeting, but I think we'll be finished before 5:30. But what I wanted to say about the Fannie Lou Hamer Branch Human Rights Conference, and George, if you can drop the registration in the chat, because quite a few of you have not registered yet, and we most certainly invite Beatrice to join us. It's a 4-hour conference, Beatrice, and it's happening on December 11th. I'm not sure what time it will be in your time zone. I think it'll be starting at noon in your time zone, Beatrice. But that's it, the Fannie Lou Hamer Human Rights Conference. But as I've said to everyone, we have to call it the Fannie Lou Hamer Branch Human Rights Conference, because we don't have the right to use Fannie Lou Hamer's name as an overall call for a human rights conference. That's why we specifically said branch, because we're a branch of WILF, and WILF has given us $1,500 to do this conference, and it's going to cover 4 areas: ending mass incarceration and the death penalty, immigration justice, the treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons, the TPNW, and then the UN International Decade for People of African Descent and the demand for reparations. So those are going to be the 4 topics that will be covered on the opening panel, and each speaker will have 10 minutes, and we'll have the pastor, executive pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church based in Atlanta, and he will speak on ending mass incarceration and the death penalty. They will be having a major conference at the Ebenezer Church in January of 2023. They wanted to get past the elections of 2022 because the senior pastor of the church is our senator from Georgia, Raphael Warnock, and he's running for re-election in November. So they did not want anything to distract from his election. So the January conference, which I attended, the June conference in 2019. So they had planned to do a conference 2 years later, and now they're waiting until January of 2023. But he'll be our speaker on that topic. And then for immigration justice, we have Azadeh Shashahani, who is Iranian, and she works for a 30-year-old organization based in the South called Project South. They're our mother organization. So we were supported by them as a Southern Anti-Racism Network to get started. So I say they're our mother organization, and they always joke with me and say we're sister organization. But SARN has been around for slightly less than 25 years, and they've been around for over 30 years. And so that's why I call them our mother organization. And then on the TPNW, we have our very own Cheryl Spencer, who's one of the co-chairs of Disarm End Wars of the WILF US section. And then finally, we have Akinyele Umoja, who's a professor and a dear friend of mine who works at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And he's an expert on the UN decade and reparations. If we had time, he does a powerful, like 2-hour presentation on reparations. And at some point, he'll be doing that again for us here in Columbus as we work to get a resolution from the city council here on support for reparations. So that's what we have going on December 11th. And if you haven't registered already, George dropped the information in the chat. Are there any questions about the 4-hour conference coming up? We'll have breakout sessions on all of those 4 areas. And so we've asked facilitators. So most of the facilitators are people we will be paying $200 honoraria because that's how we are using the $1,500 we got from Will. So for the session on ending mass incarceration and the death penalty, I think we'll be paying 3 people $200. So that's $600 gone right there. On the immigration justice, we have 2 members of WILF US, so we won't be paying them anything. That's Samantha Turner and Adrian Bernal, who should have been in this meeting today. He's a Chicano who lives in Metro Atlanta and is part of the Metro Atlanta branch. And then for the TPNW, we'll be paying Rebecca Irby, who, after I had promised her the honorarium, she joined WILF, the Detroit branch, so she's not going to be penalized. I've already mailed her $200 honorarium. Walisha Wilson, who is with an organization called New Life Second Chance and the Southern Center for Human Rights. She is one of the facilitators of the end mass incarceration and the death penalty. Another woman named Joya, who's a very bright, dynamic young woman with the Southern Center for Human Rights. She will be the other person facilitating in the end mass incarceration. I kind of jumped around, but we'll have 3 speakers in the end mass incarceration. And I think I may have named them, but that's $600 for that. For the TPNW, we'll have 2 to 3 speakers, so that's another $600. For the UN Decade, we'll have 1 facilitator who will be paid. I'll be co-facilitating with him. So that's $800 that we spent. And any money that we don't spend of the $1,500, we have to return. So I don't think we're gonna spend it all. So we'll be returning part of the money because we have WILF members who are doing so much of the heavy lifting at the Congress, at the conference on December 11th. So we've been good stewards of the WILF US grant. So are there any questions about the December 11th conference? George is telling me next is announcements, and then we'll figure out the next meeting. So seeing no questions about the conference, are there any announcements from anyone about anything going on in your community as it relates to human rights, the work of your branch, or anything we should know about? Are there any announcements?
Yes, Queen Mother.
Yes, go right ahead. You have 3 minutes, Queen Mother.
Yes, I just wanted to say to everyone that for all of us, I know that you're aware that Malcolm and Betty Shabazz's daughter passed away.
Yes.
And we buried her and had a repast with the family members at Malcolm and Betty Shabazz Culture Center in Harlem. And I would ask that we continue to pray for this family that's given so much and sacrificed so much for us. So I ask for the prayers of that family. The other concern I like to bring into the discussion are when you mention about funding, is the conference free? And if it's not, or are you entertaining scholarships for the conference as well? Thank you.
Well, the conference is absolutely free because it's on Zoom. All you have to do is register and you get in like you would any other Zoom meeting. Now, next year, when we do the second annual Fannie Lou Hamer Branch Conference, it will probably be on the ground in Columbus, Georgia. If the COVID has settled down, we will be doing an in-person conference on December 10th of 2022. But this conference is strictly virtual, Queen Mother. So there is no charge for participants. We're trying to get 300 people registered so that we can assure we have at least 100 people actually participating. So George and I are working very hard on trying to get the registrations up. We reached out to our allies in the Green Party, Holly Hart, who is head of the National Women's Caucus, or one of the leaders, I should say, in the National Women's Caucus, and she's put it out widely. And so we have lots of Black liberation organizations who are putting it out. So we think by the time we get to December 10th, we will have 300 people registered. And we've set up a way to pay for a Zoom account. It would cost us $50. So part of the money we got from the grant will be used to pay the extra if we go over 100 participants. And we're hoping to get to 160 participants. It's quite an ambitious thing, Queen Mother. So we hope that you will spread the word to your networks because we'll be asking everyone in the Black liberation movement to spread the word. And the interesting thing about it, the conference is coming about 1 year after a very successful webinar on AFRICOM, which unfortunately the white co-chairs of the Disarm in Wars Committee have done no follow-up on that important webinar. It was a webinar, but this conference is going to ask for 3 action items from each of the 4 breakout sessions. So we're going to have 12 action items that we will be discussing from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. in the closing hour of the conference on December 11th. It is something that you don't want to miss because we're all about action in the Southern Anti-Racism Network. And as a sponsor of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, we will make sure that there will be action items coming out of the conference. So we welcome your attendance. I know you will have a lot to contribute in any breakout that you choose, but when you go to the registration, you'll be allowed to make 2 choices. For the first hours, it's 2:15 to 2:55, 40 minutes. And then the second session will be 30 minutes from 3:15 to 3:45, and you can choose a different session. You don't have to go to the same one. So when you see the registration, you'll see how it works. So hearing no other questions and announcements, can we decide, Ashley and Cece, Queen Mother, did you have something more?
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge our sister Beatrice on the Zoom and the conference session. And yes, for almost 2 years, you know that none of us have been part of the United Nations. But during the General Assembly of this year, Queen Mother was absent. Usually I am in the UN doing the GA, invited by member states to participate. This year I did not participate because I was with the youth in the San Francisco, California area for the International Day of Peace this year. And I were invited, our organization, by the president of the GA, November the 17th. So some of us historically is back in the UN, and they had a town hall session for the NGOs and civil society. So I just wanted to bring that forward, and hoping by January the 3rd of 2022, we should be back in the UN, some of us. And I thank you again, Sister Beatrice.
Well, thank you, Queen Mother. I was a delegate from WILF US to the CSW in 2012. It was a very big deal to have those UN credentials, and I still have that as souvenirs from that wonderful, powerful experience. And that was one of the first CSWs in a long time that we did not reach any agreed upon conclusion. And the reason was because the African women were asked to engage in birth control, and they bolted and said, no way, our children are our assets. They carry the water, they do the work of our gathering. And so the African women opposed the attempts by some of the urban areas of Africa to address poverty in the rural areas by saying you should exercise birth control. So it went on for days afterwards trying to get agreed upon conclusions, and we had to end without any. But I'm on the NGO CSW list since that time. And so I attend several of the Zoom conferences that have taken place over the last couple of years. So I'm glad to know I can reach out to you, Queen Mother, when the time comes. So we are at the point, and I thank Jennifer Hyman for joining. She is quite late, and we're getting ready to end the meeting, Jennifer. But because you're in New York, in Brooklyn, and Queen Mother is here in Harlem, and we have at least one other member in Manhattan, we're working to rebuild the New York City branch. And so I'm totally committed to that, Jennifer, and you and I have talked about it. So it's up to you, CC and Ashley, which branch is gonna do the December 19th meeting. You would be facilitating one of your branches, either Metro Atlanta or Triangle. So
I'm gonna throw that to Atlanta just because December 19th is my birthday, and I will likely be for my birthday on that day, and I don't think I will be in a space to facilitate. It's my 35th, so yes.
Wow, 35th. Oh, isn't that sweet? Wow, you should come on, facilitate, and let it be your birthday celebration. We'll all sing happy birthday and everything, Ashley. It will just be for a little while.
Well, I'm absolutely going to be there, but I just don't want to, commit to facilitating because I know that I'm going to be in birthday mode on that day. But I'll absolutely be there and say hey
Oh yeah, because we're going to do the Stevie Wonder rendition of Happy Birthday to you.
The best one.
Okay, great, it is. So CC is on Metro Atlanta. So you and Shantae can get together. I was hoping she would be here today, but she isn't. So CC, unmute yourself so you can say, yes, it's gonna be Metro Atlanta. I'll be glad to assist. I know that Shantae is a capable facilitator, and you having been the leader of women in the NAACP, running the whole state of Georgia, women in the NAACP, CC Anderson, I know you can run a meeting. So unmute yourself, CC, and say you're all in. Don't be going to sleep on me now, CC, unmute yourself. Where are you, CC? I don't know, she's still muted, but it's on Metro Atlanta. So we will get with Shantae. There are over 28 members of the Metro Atlanta branch. So I will work with them to make sure they understand that they're running the meeting on December 19th. Is there anything else to come before the Black Liberation Caucus before we adjourn? It is 5:28, so we're sticking to our 90 minutes, except for George got to pay the Fannie Lou Hamer theme song as we exit to give everyone a chance to save the chat. We're all done. So George put on our Fannie Lou Hamer theme song with video, so everybody gets a little history about Fannie Lou Hamer, our branch's name. Thank you, George.
Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. On this little light of mine, her song would fill the air. She rocked the state of Mississippi. Now a few more black people stand there. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. For 20 years she weighed the cotton down on a white man's farm. She received threats on her life, was fired from her job, scorned and kicked off the farm. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's what the lady would yell. Her body was beaten and she walked crippled, trying to vote. She was thrown in jail. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. Land of the tree and home of the slave, she criticized the law of the land. For 100 years, blacks had lived in fear. Now they marched, took their lives in their hands. Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer. She came by here and she didn't